you know?
Yeah, we ended up, got an office space, figured out payroll, figured out, taxes and laptops and hiring and it's also a very pro-employee. Like we complain about California, which is a hard place to hire, but California's got nothing on Argentina, right?
Wow.
Like, the amount you can be on the hook for, the company never wins any lawsuit, and employees know that, so
Wow.
there's a lot on the line, but we got it to 80 people and profitable, and but it wasn't an easy road, but it's something I'm proud of, as I look back at it.
Welcome to Sharpen the Spear podcast, where we help manufacturing executives command the front and win the floor. I'm Richard Walsh, creator of the Sharpened Impact methodology, and I spent decades helping leaders transform frontline teams, unlock hidden profit, and capture capacity they didn't even know they had. If you want to see where your leadership gaps are costing you and how to fix them, head over to grittolead.com and run the free Sharpened Impact Simulator today. Let's sharpen your edge and get started. And we are back on STS Sharpen the Spear podcast with another incredible guest. Brian Samson's with us today. And Brian, no one knows Brian like Brian. So, Brian, give us the backstory, bring us up to speed so we can tear into this conversation.
Yeah, appreciate the opportunity. Maybe a couple things that people know me for. I'm the nearshore guy. So if anybody's ever heard of offshore, nearshore means talent on your time zone. So for us in the States, it's really Latin America is our backyard. And a while ago, I lived in Buenos Aires, Argentina. So got an expat experience firsthand. And I've really been focused on Latin America talent for my career. And as an entrepreneur, I've taken three companies from 0 to $4 million in annual recurring revenue, and also made about 4 million mistakes doing that. And lastly, live in Hawaii. I've got a young family, and my I've got a biological son, and then my daughter was adopted through foster care. So foster care is something that means a lot to me, means a lot to my family, and the foster care to adopt story. So I think that's kind of me in a nutshell.
Cool. Well, I've got three through the foster care to adopt.
Oh, amazing. I
Yes.
would love to
I
talk to
had
you more
six,
about
and I
that.
had three biological, and we did all that in 3.5 years. Six
Wow,
and 3.5 years. So yeah, it's
man.
crazy, but
Yeah,
it's cool. It's awesome. So yeah, super cool to hear that. It's quite a blessing, like it's awesome. And they're all upper teens, early 20s now, so it's been
that's so
good. It's been
cool.
a really cool journey. So
That's beautiful.
that's awesome. So yeah, so let's get into this. Multiple companies. What was let's just start there. So you've got three or four companies. What'd you do to the 4 million range?
Yeah, so I've taken three different ones. They're all
Yeah.
still alive. My primary focus is one called Plug today.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. It's I'm just did you do that because you got the true entrepreneurial spirit where like I'm going to build a business, exit, build a business, exit? Was that kind of your plan from the get go?
Yeah, so in a way, I did entrepreneurship on easy mode and hard mode, and I'll explain that. So, gosh, I was never like the entrepreneurial kid. I didn't do the lemonade stand, I mean, of course, you in Little League, you sell chocolate bars and Cub
Right.
Scouts, do your thing, but that was never really me. My dad worked for the same company for 30 years. I didn't know anybody that wasn't a company corporate guy. And I grew up in the Midwest. And then ended up in San Francisco, where you're kind of exposed to like the tech entrepreneurship.
Right.
So obviously there's small businesses everywhere, people that own, photo stores and shipping stores and whatever. And but I was just in this like MacBooks, hoodies, exposed duck offices, and
Right.
everyone's trying to build an app. Um, so after a few years of that, I think I finally built enough confidence where, hey, I think I could do this. But it was like all new for me. So the easy part of it, it wasn't hard to do it. It wasn't easy to do this. It was hard, but I did find an investor. So I had somebody who blew my mind that he was willing to bet on me, but he
Mm.
decided to bet $2 million on me, and fund my idea. So that gave me a little bit of the easy freedom, to make a few mistakes, mess up. It wasn't my money, so I could play a little more aggressive.
Yep.
Um, and as opposed to like later when I, funded another business with $2,000 of my own money, and I'm
Right.
like, I don't know if I want to spend $7 a month to get a Google account, and like you play it so close to the vest. Um, but that first business, it was nice to have the money, but then I look back, I also kind of did it on a hard mode because I uh, was doing sales in San Francisco, but everything else was in Buenos Aires. So I had moved there. Um, you know, People speak English, but Spanish is the native language. It's also a really vague place to do business because nothing is black and white. It's all gray. It's all you cross your fingers and pray. It's highly corrupt. There's, very loose laws on how a company can be formed, getting payroll, um, USD, exchange rates, inflation, volatility, you name it.
VAT tax. Do you have a VAT tax?
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Oops.
Yeah, there was the high VAT, couldn't get stuff on credit. So anyway, long story short, when I was in it, it was this like brute force. I'm gonna figure this out no matter what. Nothing is gonna stop me. But when I look back, like and kind of reflect on it, that was kind of crazy, like I was, first time real founder, like doing this in one of the hardest places to do business. And,
Well,
what was I thinking? Yeah.
Ryan, we call it ignorance on fire.
Yeah, that
That's what
was
it is. And you can
that's
go a good distance
yeah,
with
yeah,
ignorance on
that's a
fire,
really, really accurate way to say that.
Yep. Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, and I don't know, Brian, man, people don't get trying to do business in another country. Culture, like you said, corruption, all this stuff. We were in Albania a couple
Yeah.
months ago, and the place is growing, all this stuff, communism's gone, and but all this stuff.
Yeah.
But I mean, the food's great, a lot of cool stuff happened, but the communism left, the corruption
Yeah.
didn't. It's
Yeah.
unbelievable. I was talking to a driver there, and he's like, "I would leave. The corruption here is so bad." He goes,
Yeah.
if I had any opportunity to leave, I'd be out of
Yeah.
here." He goes, "You just can't do the right thing here."
Yeah. Yeah.
It's really
It's
frustrating.
so ingrained. It's so ingrained in society. You can't. Yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of wild, but you figure out the workarounds and everything else. When again, but it's probably, and I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but just with hindsight, you look back at that and go, man, that's some baptism by fire. Even though you had the funding, listen, that can go away in a heartbeat. Okay,
Yeah.
I mean, you can
Yeah.
burn through 2 million. I'm not saying it's not a lot of money because it is, but I'm like, you keep doing
Yeah.
stupid things, stuff tends to disappear,
Yeah.
right? So like,
True.
it's a pretty cool way to start your first business, especially
Yeah.
since you made it successful, you know.
Yeah. Yeah. We ended up, got an office space, figured out payroll, figured out, taxes and laptops and hiring. And, it's also a very pro-employee. Like we complain about California, which is a hard place to hire, but California's got nothing on Argentina, right?
Wow.
Like, the amount you can be on the hook for, the company never wins any lawsuit, and employees know that, so
Wow.
there's a lot on the line, but we got it to 80 people and profitable, and but it wasn't an easy road. but it's something I'm proud of, as I look back at it.
Yeah, that's awesome. That is awesome. All right. So that was like I love it. I love that you went to the next thing. You're in your third now, your fourth. What's that looking like for you? How long have you been in the most current one here?
Yeah, yeah. So there was one in the middle that still exists.
Right.
This was a company that is what's called recruitment process outsourcing, known as RPO. So we lease recruiters to companies that are going through big hiring booms.
Gotcha.
So think back to like late 2020, 21,
Right.
22, and if you're anywhere near, I mean, I'd say probably almost every company was thriving, but especially the venture capital funded companies of
Right.
San Francisco, New York, and it was like the recruiting budgets were unlimited. So they would just hire recruiters who would then go out and hire all the other roles. And it was so crowded, so noisy. It was an arms race, and we had clients where we would put like 20 recruiters on the project with them. And, they're all high bill rates. Um, and we would bill them for their time, not their performance, which was
Mm.
really interesting.
Oh, wow.
Recruiters typically work like real estate agents, where you could spend, months working jobs or showing clients properties and it doesn't close or something happens with inspection or whatever, and nobody ever gets paid. Um, what companies were doing with me is they had a predictable amount that they would spend every month, and then they would hope they'd get ROI, and one if one recruiter can fill a couple jobs in a month, they've certainly made, ROI versus the alternative of 20, 30, $40,000 fees for just, a single hire. And that business grew to about 60 recruiters that were all
Mm.
on projects across 20 different clients. Not everybody was in Latin America, but a vast majority were highly fluent, advanced English speakers. That business still exists today, but it's not nearly as big as it was during the big hiring boom
Right.
when there was unlimited budgets. But the primary business that I'm focused on today, it's called Plugg Technologies, Plugg.tech. And it's really Latin America tech staffing. So US companies that are probably hearing everything about, wow, like what's going on in Latin America, and they're on the same time zone. I want to learn more about this world. Um, and sure, you could DIY it, do it yourself with Fiverr and Upwork. But if you really want to tap into the best talent and tap into networks and um, get everything right with compliance and payroll and
Right.
everything else and all the infrastructure, onboarding, and hardware, which is hard to get in certain countries. That's really where we exist. So we're talent brokers for US companies that are either hiring single person or maybe large teams of people, and we'll make it happen.
Wow, that's awesome. I interviewed a guy a couple years back, 20, man, it must have been 2020, 2021. And he was recruiting and hiring for a big home improvement box store.
Yeah.
20,000 people a year they were hiring. And I'm like, I can't even do the number. I'm like,
Yeah.
20,000. That's a year.
Yeah.
That was a pace. I'm like, oh my gosh. I'm like, that's yeah, that's you're not doing that. You're not doing that by dialing the phone and talking to people. You know what I mean? So it's like it's impressive, and sometimes, Brian, what's interesting about what you've done and what you've built here and the other companies as well is I don't think the average person thinks about volume like that. The
Mhm.
need for talent, okay,
Yeah.
at a large scale. It's hard
Yeah.
to comprehend. Like I don't know who comes up. Well, let's see, maybe 20,000. It'd be good to hire 20,000 people this year. That'd be great. Like I'm thinking, I hate to hire two. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's like,
Yeah. Yeah. And
you,
at that
you,
stage, you're looking at so when it's your own money and you're going to hire one or two people,
yeah,
um
I get you.
you are like obsessed with quality and like I gotta get this right because if I don't,
Yeah.
it's a catastrophe.
OPM. So OPM, right? Other people's money. That's what
That's
we
right.
call it.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
OPM, first they buy a skyscraper with that
Yeah.
money, then they fill it.
Yeah.
It's just like,
Yeah.
here, we'll
Yeah.
just get this giant, 25-story skyscraper and then we'll fill it with all the people we need, because it's not our money.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think these bigger companies, what they're really looking for, especially when you think about the volatility of the last couple of years, we're a long way away from like 2018, 2019, like our last kind of years of normal. It's been crash, boom, crash, AI, interest rates, like, it's just kind of really hard to predict. So if I'm a CFO, and big companies have CFOs and finance people that are doing planning, and a lot of capital that companies are spending is on labor. So they're really thinking about what do we need, but how can we quickly get out of this if things go south?
Right.
They want optionality, they want flexibility. Um, and it's not to say they don't care about quality, but they equally care about optionality and flexibility and the ability
Right.
to grow quickly or retract quickly without consequence.
Well, yeah, and that's just smart business sense.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
mean, everyone's great when they're doing well, but when the
yeah.
restriction comes, like some of us didn't make it. 08, 09, I didn't make it. I was
Yeah,
crushing it till I wasn't. And
that's
then it
right.
was
That's
gone,
right. Yeah.
poof, overnight.
We all
So
think we're the world's best salesperson when
yeah,
it's on
until
the
you're
market.
not.
Yeah.
but yeah, but so I think that's actually an advantage. And I'm thinking about your business when you've got CFOs and these guys are strategizing, they're forecasting everything else because they can do predictive work, right? So now
Yeah.
they can reach out to you, say, here's what we see. I'm gonna need about 3,750 people over the next 2.5 years, in these positions, everything else. So you can kind of ramp up for that, right? Is that kind of how it works? I mean, you're not just gonna
Yeah.
call you, go, you got 10,000 people I can put on, you know?
Yeah, but it's all math,
Yeah,
like you decide, okay, so let's say we need 3,000 hires. We're going to have some attrition. We also know that, not everyone's going to accept the offer. So maybe we need to make 5,000 offers. But to make 5,000 offers, we need 15,000 on-site interviews. But to have
right,
15,000 on-site interviews, we need 50,000 phone screens. Therefore, we need 100,000 candidates. To get 100,000 candidates in a 1 year time frame, we need however many recruiters and inbound applications and sourcing referrals but it's all math. It's all math.
yeah, yeah, with dollar signs by it.
Yeah, yeah,
it's,
that's right.
it's
That's
math
right.
with dollar signs. Man, that's a lot. So let me ask you this from kind of an operational side for you. Is this something that when these companies are requesting this, do you like look at the business and go, are you actually set up for this kind of volume? Like, do you have systems, process, you have this in place? We want to make an assumption they do, but that's a lot of people to onboard and assimilate into
Yeah,
the company and all that. So
yeah.
I'd be curious also about what is the turnover rate, the attrition on that kind of stuff.
Yeah, yeah. Onboarding is really the magic word
Right.
because at that scale, it's easy for people to not feel like a person. They feel like a
Yeah.
number. They're just kind of, stamped like, somebody
Yeah.
going through an assembly line or a supply chain. And you want an environment where, it should function like the framers of the Constitution, had set it up where there's the federal government, but politics is really local, right? And
Right.
there's states and cities and counties
Yep.
and mayors and then people feel and then it's really about like who's on the PTA and is trash being picked up in my city. So you want people to feel like they've got a line manager that they can talk to, that they've got clear goals, clear outcomes. Because it's one thing to be doing all the planning and strategy, at corporate, but people really care about, what am I doing on a daily
Right.
basis? Am I getting paid on time? Am I making an impact? Are the expectations clear? And that's really what it comes down to.
Yeah, that's good though to see that other side because you'll hear a lot these days, especially regardless of the generation. I'm air quoting, but no one wants to work. No one wants to do this. I go, they do want to work.
Yeah,
They go,
yeah,
people want to work. They like to work. They just want the right job. They want purpose,
yeah,
right? They want recognition. And some doesn't have to be a lot, like a pat on the back once in a while. It's kind of okay. You know what I mean?
yeah,
And then quality pay. That's the third
yeah,
thing. And I think if people, because I can find great workers all the time if you can put them into a culture that they fit in, a
yeah.
business culture, you know what I mean? Where they, and that's what I think a lot of businesses have ignored for a really long time. Some are getting back on that wagon. They're starting to realize there's something broken here because they're starting to really look at the turnover cost. Cost
Yeah,
of turnover is just brutal,
yeah,
and they try to sweep that under the rug, but I'm like, there's no getting away from it.
yeah,
A 4 week onboarding process, training, all this stuff, it's tens of thousands,
yeah,
per employee. And all of a sudden you're losing 15-20% a year is dropping
yeah.
off. That's a ton of money, especially doing the
Oh,
numbers you guys do.
it's
That's a
huge. Yeah,
ton of money.
yeah, 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 absolutely.
Yeah, that's so I love the grand scale of it. Okay.
Hmm.
That's why I think what you do is cool
Yeah, yeah,
because
no,
it's, like I said, I've hired headhunters before, and they go out, they bring me 3 people, and I choose from 3 people. It costs me 8 grand, 10 grand, whatever, and I get an office manager. Woo, you know what I mean? But I'm not. They're not looking at 1,000. You know what I mean, or whatever. So it's and everything's changed. That was 20 years ago, right? But we kind of look at I've been watching this for a long time because virtual assistants, right? Maybe what would it be about what 12, 15 years ago, that kind of became a little thing that what a lot of people didn't know about. This is pre Fiverr and Upwork and all that stuff, but they were out there and you could get them, and it was cool. Bookkeepers, the whole thing. So that was kind of my introduction. I'm like,
mhm.
oh, that's man, it's $4 an hour or whatever, and they're doing their
Yeah,
thing, and
sure.
they're in the Philippines and whatever. So that was like really useful, to a point.
Mhm.
There's limitations no matter where or who you have, but it
Yeah,
was a significant savings for things you didn't have full time work for.
right. Yeah.
That's where I felt it really filled the gaps.
Yeah, yeah, kind of this fractional
Right.
contract and freelancer. Yeah, yeah,
And
you're absolutely right. And like small businesses have to think like that,
right.
not everything is a, on-site 100K salary job.
Right. And to what you just said, you've now seen the evolution of the fractional CFO, the
Hmm.
fractional CMO, right? These
Sure.
people have learned to go, ooh, I can go and do projects. Right? I
Yeah,
can go for 3 months, 6 months, knock it out of the park for them, move on, get a big paycheck, move on, and do that with 2 or 3 people at the same time. And you know what I mean? They've built some incredible businesses out of that, and they're not
absolutely.
one place every day, same old thing, right? So I
Yeah,
found
yeah,
that pretty fascinating. So I saw the evolution of that too. It's pretty cool.
yeah, 100%. Yeah. I think that's good for everybody, like you get a little variety. Plus, at that fractional level, you're getting so much more learning, from different companies, different
That's it.
systems, and then you recycle this back, and you're that much more valuable too.
Right. And they're bringing the latest.
Yeah,
We had a big landscape company where I used to live, and big, and they get these kids right out of college, agronomists, all they got all the new degrees, and they bring them in and put them on the crews as whatever leads and foremen and stuff, and they'd milk them for everything they know.
yeah,
Okay, pay them not a lot for like 2 years, and those guys move on, right? But they're always current. Now, them
yeah,
as a company, they're current with everything, every chemical, every this, everything, all the stuff that's going on. And I'm like, okay, that's a pretty cool system.
yeah,
That's pretty smart. They get those, and the kids get experience, right? They don't have any experience. They have knowledge. They have no experience. So what a great place to go into, learn all their stuff. Now their next job is going to be a little higher level of management, more money, more title, all that stuff. So it's interesting how everyone works that stuff.
yeah, yeah, 100%, 100%. Totally agree.
Yeah. So what's the range of, I'll call it, skill sets that you deal with? Is it like endless? Are you like a little, you
Yeah,
got some guardrails? What are you working with?
yeah, yeah. So, I think maybe to give some framework and context. So when we think about Asia, and there's a lot of countries in Asia, but the big three in my mind are India, China, and the Philippines for offshore. Philippines have kind of positioned themselves as the place for VAs, call center,
Right.
customer service, back
Right.
office. China's really been the factory of the world, right? The manufacturing center. And then India's really been, IT, software engineers,
Right.
things like that. So when we look at Latin America, our instinct sometimes is like, "Oh, it's just like all one giant country." But Latin America has those nuances too. So, Mexico is really, I was in Monterrey recently and like, wow, there's car companies everywhere and manufacturing. They also do a lot of IT. So Mexico's, a great place for that. Brazil has become the epicenter for AI and data engineers. Costa Rica is much more developed, so it's more expensive, but less risk. Their neighbor Nicaragua kind of has similar talent, call center, manufacturing, this young, energetic workforce, but it's a little more volatile. Argentina, software developers, kind of so on and so forth. So if anybody's listening, I would, recommend talking to someone like me. Doesn't have to be me, but someone like me who
Right.
can advise you on the right company, I'm sorry, the right country, the right budget, hardware, all the different things you got to consider in terms of, where you want to hire. And then the types of roles people tend to look at Latin America for. Um, it's really anything that you could do virtually. So IT, marketing, accounting, finance, call center, back office. I will say no one's really looking at Latin America for junior people because you're already getting this huge arbitrage of what I would pay a junior person in the States, I can get a senior person for in Latin
Right.
America. So why, go all the way down? Um, and then the second is you're probably not hiring executives, but there's a lot of room to run in the middle, and that includes managers and directors. I've gotten some amazing manager and director talent there that are capable of leading teams, solving problems, organizing work, building dashboards, directing stuff. And I'll say one more thing, Richard, in that Latin America is a volatile place. You
Yeah.
know, I mean, we just saw the capture of Maduro in Venezuela
Yeah.
after,
Snatching dictators. It's awesome.
yeah, after decades of, I mean, the conditions that people were living in was just
Well, I
incredible.
had real quick, I got a guy, he lives in Colombia now.
Yeah.
His family was down there, right? They had a $50 million a year business. He just confiscated it. They just had
Yeah,
to give it all to him. They're like, they moved. Okay. They had like, and they were teaching English.
yeah,
That was their business. Like
yeah,
50 million a year they were doing,
yeah,
and they
yeah,
just took it.
yeah,
So like,
yeah,
yeah, they packed up and left. But a lot of people
yeah,
couldn't do that. So yeah, it's a crazy situation. But wow,
yeah,
yeah, people. Oof. I remember when
yeah,
that was really hitting,
yeah,
and so I'm like, I remember I was talking to a guy down there. I was gonna have him do some video editing and stuff for me, and I'm like, dude, like, how are things?
yeah,
I said, well, we're trying to get by, trying to eat, like literally
yeah,
like trying to find some food,
yeah,
and stuff. So I'm like hooking the guy up, does great
yeah,
work, but that
yeah,
was a big deal. You know what I mean?
yeah,
Like just getting those gigs meant more to me. It meant more to me helping him than me getting my work done. You know what I
yeah,
mean? I was kind of like, dude, I'm going to find some more work for you. You know,
yeah,
like,
yeah,
like, man, you
yeah,
guys are in a, that is not of their choosing. But
yeah, yeah. And I
yeah,
think but there's also this element of, um, Latin America is just a little bit different in how they think about politics, how they think about inflation, budget management. But we have to remember that this is poor leadership.
right,
It's not a reflection on the population, but it actually has this amazing byproduct effect. And I say this with all flattery, like that video editor you talked about has gone through so much hardship, but it's most likely created somebody who's able to take chaos and be calm, be
Right.
scrappy, flexible, adaptable, think on his feet, solve problems, clever, not afraid to say yes and figure stuff out, which I think every entrepreneur wants. And Latin America, is just loaded with people like that, where I think Asia is much more like structured. Like you got to have a
Right.
process already for them to follow. Latin America, you could throw a problem down there and they're like, let me figure this out. I'll get back to you tomorrow, you know?
Yeah, that's awesome. That's awesome. Yeah, like El Salvador.
Yeah,
Look at they
yeah,
you talk about leadership.
yeah.
I mean, in 5 years, man, just I mean, one of the most
Amazing.
incredible things I've ever seen.
Yeah,
The turn
yeah.
of crime to murder to where like it's one of the coolest things I've ever seen in my life.
I love that story. Yeah, I
Yeah,
actually interviewed
that is
a guy
cool.
who Salesforce.com, there's Salesforce developers, admins. Um, I know a guy who built a really successful business um, only with Salesforce developers from El Salvador. You know,
Wow, awesome.
it's yeah. I mean, there's talent everywhere. You just gotta
There
invest.
is. There
Yeah,
is important, So let me ask you this, because you probably get hit with these questions and stuff too. Like, and you hear, yeah, I heard someone for $4 an hour in the Philippines are doing this and this. So people get a little testy on that, think we're taking advantage of people and everything else. And just bring some clarity, on cost of livings and things like that. And it's just because everyone thinks you're like, well, I'm getting my slave labor, and that kind of stuff. I'm like, no, these people are like legit, like intelligent, they're certified, they're qualified, they're high end, but also just understand the economics of the world, because no one in America knows. They just think everyone is, you know, we have the
Mhm.
richest poor people in the world. You know,
Yeah,
they
yeah,
they don't understand this. So kind of give some clarity to that, Brian.
yeah, sure. Well, I do think we can't have it both ways. Like we can't uh, have global markets that we could sell to, but then only have talent from our country, right? It's global all around, right?
Right.
So um, and but there are also things that because it's a global market, there are things that are really expensive for other people, in different parts of the world, and they can't have it. Like this iPhone here, it wasn't that stressful for me to purchase, but this might be like a month's salary for somebody,
Right.
and just because they make a lower amount doesn't mean that the iPhone costs any less for them,
Right.
right? So anyway, just to say that every country has different cost of living. Um, you as the employer always get to choose, what you pay people. Um, there are even levels in Latin America, like Central America, outside of Costa Rica, tends to be a lot less expensive than Brazil or Argentina.
Right.
We were even advising a company yesterday that was looking to hire a sales development rep. And hey, if you really wanted to double down on B2B tech sales, you probably want to look at Colombia or Brazil or Argentina. But Brazil is going to be the most expensive, and
Right.
then Argentina, and then, Colombia. But if cost is really the number one thing, then it's Central America. But maybe to get back at your overall question of, things cost what they cost because of government policy, right? And you've got developed countries and developing. But at one point, America was a developing country,
Yep.
right? We all kind of go through our phases. China right now, 20 years ago, everything was cheap in China, but now there's convergence and real estate wealth, and people are making, like software developers are making $4,000 or $5,000 a month, where 20 years ago they were making 1,000. So then, if you really want cheap, then you look at Vietnam or Cambodia. There's always another developing country, but then on their rise to wealth, they become developed, and then it's a matter of the most important word in this whole equation is value. Um,
Right.
Anytime you're hiring, you want more value than what you're paying, right?
Yep.
And if you're OpenAI and you're worth, $500 billion, you hear about these acquisitions that they'll make where, gosh, I mean, these are like they're paying, the equivalent of like eight-figure salaries to people, in terms of the equity that they're giving and cash compensation and bonuses. But they're not doing that for nothing because they think they can still get a 10x return on this person, and that $10 million cost is going to generate $100 million in revenue. So if you're a little smaller, we all we're all a lot smaller than OpenAI. So for me, um, I've actually paid people 100K in Latin America, but they're generating millions, right?
Right.
So it's all this kind of multiplier effect of how you're thinking about it.
Yeah, that's great. It's just good to understand that. I think a lot of people don't, like you said, what kind of value are they bringing? Me as an employee, as a business, my goal is always to give more value than I'm being paid for.
Right.
And I expect the same from my employees
Yeah.
because I want
Yeah.
them to be an asset.
Yes.
So if I got to pay them 100 grand and they're bringing me in a million, that's quite an asset.
That's right.
Okay,
That's
I'm
right.
okay with that. Right, I'm gonna keep
Yeah.
them around. I'm gonna give them a
Yeah.
hug every other day. Okay,
That's
you
right.
just keep
That's
going,
right.
right? So I totally get it, but I think, like I said, some people just don't. They haven't really drilled down and understand that global thing. Like, well, again, I would say we were in Albania and we're getting like these unbelievable meals for like $5, $6.
Yeah.
The food there is fantastic. So my son was
Yeah.
taking us all over the place, and it just was, it's just a different economy, but everyone's there and everyone's driving a, I don't know, a G Wagon and a Audi and all this stuff, even though they don't obey any traffic laws at all. Okay, you're taking
Yeah.
your life in your own hands. But fun fact, I'm there for 4 days driving a standard, doing the whole thing. Like they're not looking, there's roundabout. It's like you think you're gonna die every moment
Yeah.
in the car, right? I got 5 people in the car. But then like 4 days in, I realized I don't see one scratch. I don't see one bumper hanging off. I don't see a busted tail light anywhere in
Yeah.
Tirana, okay, the capital. I'm like,
Yeah.
these people got it figured out.
Yeah.
Whatever they're doing is driving. It's insane. I mean, but I just like to be able to park on the sidewalk. That was kind of fun. Just roll up
Yeah.
and get out,
I think that's
but
awesome. Yeah.
but
Yeah.
it's just, again, it's cultural stuff,
Yeah.
but it doesn't change their capabilities.
Yeah. It doesn't change their capabilities. And I also want to comment, this might get me in trouble here, but it's Friday, we're having fun, in that I think if you're a business owner, you look at the world a little bit differently. Like
Yeah,
it's like for me to feed my family and feed my employees' families, I've got to take some risk, and I got to put some pressure on my shoulders to deliver the product or service that is going to make somebody else's life better, right? Um, so capitalism is like deeply rooted in that sentence,
right.
right? Um, but there's a whole other world there, of I want what I think I deserve, no matter what, no matter my contribution or effort. And you can't be an entrepreneur and think like that,
No,
right? So there is a whole other world that's kind of gaining momentum. Um, I'm not supportive of that mindset.
well,
Um,
they're takers. We call them drains. You need to
yeah,
be a
yeah,
fountain, not a drain.
yeah,
Okay,
yeah,
we'll put it in the nicest way possible. Be a
yeah,
fountain, not a drain.
yeah. So when you look at the global talent pool, we all got to stay competitive here,
Yeah,
and no matter what level you're at, you got to make sure that your compensation creates a return on investment for the person who's paying the compensation.
right.
So if you're in a place like San Francisco that you need to make $300,000 to pay your rent, um, your returns got to be in the millions, right? And if you're in El Salvador and you can get by on $1,500 a month, then maybe it can be a lot less and you still get that ROI. Maybe it could be in the tens of thousands. But people have to just level set the size of their impact in relation to the size of their compensation.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it, Brian. It really is. Um, Yeah, it's so I've been like I said, I've been doing the VA thing for man, probably since 2012 maybe. That's when I
Mhm.
started because I always had in-house and all that stuff with my first
Yeah,
business for 20 years and that was
yeah,
all good. Then it just was getting to the point where it wasn't super sustainable.
yeah,
You started looking at it and also we didn't know we had the option.
yeah,
So there was no, I mean, you could hire a bookkeeper who does part-time stuff, and that was
mhm,
another thing that I really liked was bookkeeper and then you have accountants. They're
yeah,
different. Okay.
right,
Like you hire a bookkeeper, yes, it's less, but everything's in order and you don't show up with a shoebox full of receipts to your accountant, tell him to figure it out. You give him actual stuff that he can knock out in a heartbeat. You know what I mean? And you save money there too. But you really started looking, I think with the evolution of things like Fiverr, Upwork, all that stuff, it was pretty interesting. Now I use it a lot for little things. Like Fiverr, like here, design this flyer. Like
yeah,
marketing for me, like here, just knock this out. I have a guy, his name's Muhammad, out of Pakistan.
right.
He's done 100+ gigs for me over the last, I don't know, 8 years, 9 years.
Wow, that's so
He's
cool.
my guy. I
That's
give him
great.
anything, man. He bangs it out like a day, man. It's just the price is right. Everything's perfect. I'm like, he drives huge value.
Yeah,
There's no like, I think out of 100 things, maybe if I asked him to change 3 things, okay, like he
that-
gets it right and he nails
that-
it. And I know in Pakistan because I have a friend here who's from there, and he's like, he goes, you got to understand, like they barely make $150 a month. He
yeah,
goes, and they're just getting by. He
right,
goes, this, they get these gigs like Fiverr and they make 10 and $20 at a time and they make 10 of those. Okay, they're making more doing that, doing 10 gigs that maybe take them 3, 4 hours than they're getting paid a
right.
whole month on a really crappy job.
Yeah,
So he
yeah,
says
I
it's
mean,
pretty cool when they really build a really successful business on there. So again, it's not like, oh, here, let me pay you double. I'm just
yeah,
saying like that. There's a great exchange there. I really
yeah,
like it, and you create a relationship. You got a
yeah.
video guy, maybe I don't have any website guys anymore, but that kind of stuff. And it's a quick go-to. I'm not trying to recreate, the greatest brand in the world or something. I'm like, make this because I can't. Okay.
Yeah.
My,
Yeah.
my time
No,
is worth more than $10 or $20.
yeah, I
Okay.
realized like how few skills I have as
Right.
soon as I was exposed to the rest of the world. But you know, this doesn't have to be an immigration issue. This just has to be a concept around we live in a global world where
Right.
talent is abundant and talent is global, and we just need to remember that just because the US is the largest economy in the world doesn't mean that uh, things need to be closed off.
Right.
It's
So I
yeah,
had a guest on a couple of days ago.
yeah,
Great, really. I was like, oh, I didn't think of this. He's got a marketing company and some other things. He's built a global team,
yeah, yeah,
right? So they're 24/7 because
right,
all the time zones. He's
yeah,
like, so I don't have a ton of people, but we're 24/7. Like
right,
stuff's getting done all the time. We can get stuff back so fast. They're working when I'm sleeping. It's like this is amazing. I'm like, man, I never kind of put all that together, but they're all working for him,
yeah,
right? But in all these different time zones. So
sure,
there's always stuff happening. So I'm like, see, that's creative.
yeah.
That's making use of that, and you're getting completely different from marketing and creative design and stuff like that. You're getting very different inputs, which is really cool. So they're solving some pretty amazing problems because they're all coming from different perspectives, and it kind of adds this extra juice to the whole product.
That's a really great point. We get so hung up on I think diversity of skin color, but
Right.
diversity of thought is
Yeah.
so
It's
huge,
going to
right?
make you a lot more money. Let's just
Yeah, yeah,
okay.
yeah, diversity of thought and like the different angles and perspectives I get from working with Latin America, but easily you could say the same thing about Albania or
Right.
Nigeria or Vietnam or whatever. The way that they approach problems, it's awesome to have that on your team.
Right. Because again, I love the U.S. I love it. I'm a Marine. I got the whole thing. I love my country and everything else. But
Yeah.
when you forget, like I grew up poor, had to do all this stuff, right? Fight for all my stuff, make a business happen, start with nothing, and all that. You kind of forget as you get comfortable or you get successful what the advantages of that.
Right.
of like struggling and clawing and being
Oh,
super resourceful instead of
yeah.
just having all the money and everything else. Like these people are thinking constantly, right?
Yeah.
So like me, I tell people I only work under pressure. So I'm a
Yeah.
steel sculptor, right, Brian? So I do these world class exhibits, whatever. But
Yeah.
people will commission me for something, or they used to, and I'm like, well, when do you want it done? They'll say, oh, whenever. I go, oh yeah, that time doesn't work for me because the last part of that word is never. Okay, because I need pressure. If you tell me Tuesday, it'll be done. Okay,
Yeah.
I'm good. I'll make it happen, whatever it takes. But I don't like open ended deals. I
Yeah.
need to have like I need some pressure. I do well, but it just goes back to that too. When you're scrapping and moving and making this stuff, there's a creativity that comes out that a comfortable person doesn't have because they don't have the stress. You can have the
Right.
perfect life and you got your canvas and you got your paints and you're painting these things, but you're not going to get what that person who's did a 6 mile walk for water and eating some piece of fruit he found on the ground or whatever, and now he's creating art. That's going to be a way different painting, than what you're making. There's
Yeah.
going to be a little more intensity there. You know what I mean?
Man,
Because he
that was,
sacrificed so much just to do that, right?
I love what you just said there because I've got two young kids, they're 5 and 6, and we live in Hawaii. Like this is their childhood is way different from mine, where I
Right.
was shoveling snow and but I think the most important thing my wife and I can give these kids is the chance to struggle,
Yeah.
overcome adversity, build self-esteem. Just because we're doing well doesn't mean that it was always this way for us. We
Yeah.
had to overcome a lot. So, but you kind of have this built in with Latin America and a lot of other places in the
Right.
world. So if you're listening, you're in the States, whether it's the Marine Corps or somewhere else, like going through this, what is it like adapt, overcome? I might
Yep.
butcher this a little bit, but
Yep.
but that ethos is spot on of,
Kids do
like,
hard things. All
yeah,
my
yeah,
kids,
do hard
I
things.
put them
Yeah,
through hard things. I taught them how
yeah,
to box. They do this. We work out. They run. They do hard things.
yeah,
Have
yeah,
to do. You know,
yeah. I love
my
it.
son had to do 3 a days for 7 months before he went in the Corps. Okay,
Yeah,
obstacle courses in the yard, 20-foot rope
yeah,
climbs, carrying logs, the whole thing, right? Like, but he's a stud now.
that's
He's
awesome.
he's killing it there. So, but all the kids, the same thing though. It's that, whether you have it or not, it's not a matter of having or not having. It's putting
Yeah,
yourself in those situations. Like,
right.
what does this mean? What am I actually fighting for? Give me a goal that's not easily obtainable, because if it's easily obtainable, it's not a goal, right?
Yeah,
So I like to
that's
call them
right.
targets because we hit targets. Goals, yeah, that's way out there. What are the targets along the way, and stretch them. Just stretch them. And I think, going back to the whole ultimate conversation here, I that's why I love to tap into these other cultures because they're at a different point. They have the skill set, right? And if we just look for skills, how do you? It, okay, you all got skills. So what? Okay, that's competency. Great. Well, I can improve anybody's competency. That's not like a big thing. Where's the character? What kind of characters do they have? What have they been through? What are they doing now? Where are they trying to go? That kind of stuff. That's what I want to look at because that's who's going to be able to deliver what I need to have done. Right? They're going to be resourceful. They're going to think about things. They're going to be able to adapt on that. They're going to have a little more, ferocity. Right? They're going to come after stuff, and that's what I want. Right? And it's not a matter of money; it's a matter of mindset.
Yeah, that's right.
So you got to understand, like you're not just tapping into a payroll savings. Okay,
Hmm.
that's why I like this conversation, Brian, because you have to really understand who you're hiring.
Hmm. Hmm.
You're not if you're hiring for wages, like forget it. Just forget it. I wouldn't even have you as a client if I was you. I'd be like, no, okay, because that's your only litmus test. How low can you pay? Well,
Yeah,
that's not serving the people you recruit, and it's not going to serve them either. You know
that's
what I
right.
mean? So it's just kind of funny, but I get into these mindset conversations once in a while with people, and they don't really think this way.
Yeah,
And you kind of got to bring them back to reality on this stuff. Like, you don't understand, this isn't exploitation. Okay, this is you're providing opportunity,
hmm. Hmm.
and you're going to get that back in spades.
That's right.
Okay,
That's right.
that's what people don't realize. I
Yeah.
really don't think they realize because I've virtually never had a bad experience. Okay, I've had better than others, but that's human nature. But I've
Yeah.
never had the horrible experience.
Yeah.
It's always been a good thing. Now, again, I
Yeah.
get better and I get, not as good or whatever, but it's never been horrible.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I'm probably sounding a little redundant here, but nothing is you know no one has a birthright to anything. Like you've got to
Right.
earn it. And the rest of the world understands that. But if you're born into a rich country in a like highly developed place, you take a lot of that for granted and you
Yep.
just kind of think like this company owes me, this government owes me, these people owe me. Um, but the rest of the world doesn't think like that, and
Right.
that's what you got to worry about.
I had a guy tell me he's really mad at the company he's working for because they shortened the window for being late by 3 minutes.
Yeah,
And he's all ticked off. And I looked at him, I said, dude, if I heard you voice that, I'd fire you on the spot.
yeah, yeah,
Because like what I'm like, I can't even imagine. Like, I guarantee you're not getting that in Latin America.
yeah. No,
Like 100%. Okay, my guys were all Latinos and stuff who worked for me for those
yeah,
couple of decades. And man, dude, they were never late, never missed a day. My foreman was one day in 10 years because he
yeah,
had to go to the ER. He was that sick and
yeah,
showed up the next day. Okay.
yeah,
And they just loved to work. I took care of them, man. We were a heck of a team and we did all this stuff. But yeah, so there's again, mindset, exposure, culture, all that. So there's all these factors. And I'm really enjoying the conversation, Brian, because I don't think people go in at this level to understand this. You know what I mean? They're just give me people. But I think when you dissect this a little bit, like we are, I think there's a lot of value coming out of this to give people a better understanding. Also, a lot of people they don't, do you have, how do I put this? It's like some people just um, they won't even look at it. They just
mm,
don't think it's a thing to do, or it's kind of, I don't know, it's kind of weird. There's some business out there too that, and there's nothing wrong with hiring local if that's what you can do and that's what you need. There's no problem. But a lot of their stuff, when I coach them in business and stuff like that, like you don't need a full-time person here.
mm,
You've got
mm.
one person doing four different things
Sure.
and they don't do any of them well.
Yeah.
Okay. So like I might have some options. Okay.
Right.
And they're
Sure.
paying four times what you're going to pay someone else. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? So I'm like, you might want to think about this. Let's run some
True.
numbers.
Yeah.
Okay. And let's see what the ROI is going to actually be.
Sure.
Okay?
Yeah.
So
True.
it's all a process, right? It's all a
Yeah.
process. It's just great to make people aware of the opportunities.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah, it's great stuff. Great stuff. So kind of big picture view, where do you see all of this going in the future? Let's do a little, projecting here.
Yeah. Yeah. So, AI is the elephant in the room. But also in the US, we tend to think we're the only ones that have the access to this stuff.
Yeah.
But the rest of the world's got access to everything too. So, um, but I think like every dog has its day, like every country kind of goes through from, developing to a
Yep.
teenager to they're,
Yep.
highly developed and then, maybe they start to slip and you look at countries like England, right?
Right.
That it's kind of gone from, king to now then they just kind of keep slipping. So, but then they'll have their day again, right? And it's that saying about, tough times, create
Yep.
strong men and,
Right.
everybody knows that quote. So, what am I trying to say? I think Latin America is the place for this decade, but could be Africa in the 2030s, and it could be Southeast Asia that didn't have its heyday. There was like the tigers, like the big Asian tigers of the 1990s to 2000s. But that was just a couple countries, not all of them. And then
Right.
there's Malaysia and then Indonesia are going to have their day. So all this to say is, every dog has its day. Every country will have their ups and their downs. but somebody's always going to have their day and you got to compete with them. So
Right.
pick the ones um that have the biggest win in their sales. And if you can hang with them, it's like that saying, if you could make it in New York, you could make it anywhere.
Right.
You could hang with the ones that have the win in the sales, you could hang with anybody. And it doesn't matter if you're in Cincinnati or San Francisco, you should be thinking that way.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, there's, like I said, I think we said earlier, there's just a lot of talent out there
Yeah, yeah,
globally,
yeah,
and we touched on everything from time zones to the whole thing.
yeah.
It is awesome. And it's a lot to chew on, but like, I hope it inspires people like to think differently about this, the applications, because it's
Yeah,
not one. It's
yeah,
not
yeah.
one thing. They're not going to do one thing. Like you got to really understand like what you can put together. So it's really awesome. I'm glad you're doing this. So what are you seeing growth wise for you?
Yeah, we're I think we're in a spot right now where a lot of people know who we are. A lot of people know that Latin America is where they want to build. So we feel very excited. We think we'll have, 30-40% top line growth this year and even better on the bottom line because it's an economies of scale type business.
Yeah, that's awesome. You know what? I wanted to ask one thing earlier, but I'm going to ask it now. Hopefully we don't go off the rails. There's a big Chinese influence in South America, right? I mean, does that affect what you've got going
Well,
on, or is are they pulling
well, it's
back?
interesting. I
They're
mean,
probably not.
yeah, I mean, to talk politics, I think Marco Rubio is very focused on um, this is our hemisphere.
Right,
So,
right.
like
Yeah,
if anybody's going to influence it for better or worse, it's going to be us, right?
yeah.
Um, but China's already been all over Africa and they,
Yep. Yeah,
have
for a long
loans,
time.
big
Yep.
infrastructure projects and they were you know, it was like Venezuela was kind of a fight between China, Russia, and the States,
Right.
who is gonna have the most influence and therefore extract the most value. But anyway, I think well, it's interesting, because you may not know, but Japan has the largest presence of Japanese outside of Japan, and
In
in
in South America.
yeah, in Sao Paulo actually, and
Okay.
then in Argentina, grocery stores are typically owned by Chinese. And, Argentines will even refer to I'm going to the Chino, like it's kind of a slang. It's not
Right.
meant to be offensive, you know, um, and, it's wild. You see a Chinese person speaking Spanish in Argentina,
Right. Right.
you know, um, so, there's Chinese people everywhere you go.
Right.
There's Asian influence, kind of everywhere. The world's much more global and mobile. And you look at, the strength of the US has been by bringing in the best immigrants from all over the world. And every country wants that. I mean, that was actually a big driver of the Japanese going to Brazil is, skilled labor in a place that really requires skilled labor.
Yeah, because they don't have any.
Yeah.
I mean, their
Yeah.
birth rates are in the tank.
Yeah.
They don't, I think they only have one car manufacturer left in Japan.
Yeah. That might be right.
They
That
all
might
are
be right.
here. Didn't
Yeah.
wasn't Honda like promoting like the Super Bowl or what? I mean, I don't know. It was something else. I can't. I mean, I wish I remember, but I'm like legit U.S. company,
Yeah.
which I
Yeah.
know they are kind of, but I mean, but it's just, the reason I brought all that up was I want people to understand like there is influence in these countries. It's not
Yeah.
just giant wall, just one box. So there's a lot going on. So,
Yeah.
yeah, really cool. I'm glad you could touch on that a little bit. But so how can people get in touch with you, Brian? Like
Yeah. Thanks.
find out about
Yeah.
your services and everything else, because I think there's a lot of value you can bring to people's
Yeah, I
business.
appreciate that. So I would say people are much more nearshore curious than they've ever been. They're hearing about Latin America. Maybe they listen to a show like this and they want to learn more. Our website is plugg.tech, and we talk to people all day long about why Latin America could be interesting, could be helpful. If so, and you want these types of roles or this types of budget, or you want to get this kind of hardware, in and out with customs and tariffs and everything, So we do all day, no strings
Nice.
attached. Just go to Plugg's website. There's a contact us form, and we'll take it from there.
Oh, that's awesome. I'm really glad you like, because that's the stuff that nobody knows.
Yeah,
All that hardware, this, all that, there's a lot
yeah,
more to it than people think, you know?
yeah, for
So
sure.
that's awesome. You do all that too. So yeah, this has been, Brian, this has been fantastic. What a great conversation, man.
I
I
really
really,
enjoyed it. This has been a really nice one. I really appreciate it.
excellent, excellent, my man. Well, appreciate all the time you gave us today. And for everybody else, we'll see you on the next STS podcast. Thanks for joining me on the Sharpen the Spear podcast. If you're a manufacturing executive and you're serious about unlocking hidden profit, improving frontline leadership, and taking control of your floor, go to grit2lead.com right now. Run the free Sharpened Impact Simulator and discover your biggest opportunities are hiding. Don't leave millions on the table. Sharpen your spear, lead from the front, and win the floor. Until next time, stay sharp.